guys, this is Rojan and welcome to my new YouTube channel and welcome to my epic guide to building the ultimate custom water-cooled PC. Today I will be unveiling my first ever custom water-cooled PC with some of the super ultimate high-end components in here. So this is my first time building a PC itself. It took me a long time gathering all the knowledge I needed for creating a PC. I put everything in this video together to help some of you guys to build a gaming PC yourself. But I'm extremely happy with the results that I saw and it made me proud. Because it's not true what they say that it's tough to build a water-cooled PC. But because I did it myself and this is my first time ever. Trust me when I tell you, I'm so new at this, I actually don't even know where to start. I actually didn't even know where to plug the display cable. I was that bad at it. So if I can build something like this, so can you guys. So stay tuned, have fun and tell me what you think in the comments. So we got Be Quiet chassis, Asus motherboard, EVGA GeForce RTX 2080 Hydro Copper, 8GHz PCIe cable for the GPU, AMD 3950X CPU, 4 16GB G-Skill RAM, Seagate 1TB SSD, Seagate 2TB HDD, 850W Game Max power supply, 140mm Corsair fan, Corsair Commander Pro, Corsair RGB hub, Corsair RGB LED strips, 8GHz sleeve cable, Thermaltake HARDTUBE liquid cooling kit, 4 Thermaltake PETG HARDTUBEs, which is a total of 8 that is also included in the liquid cooling kit, Asus ROG keyboard, Asus ROG headset, Pacific HARDTUBE bending kit, heat gun, 1 screwdriver, 2 players, McAfee antivirus, Microsoft Windows 10 OS, 32-inch Acer LED monitor, gaming chair, 1 Marshall speaker, 1 bottle of water and 1 box of Haagen-Dazs ice cream. Here I'll be using the Be Quiet's Dark Base 700, and one of the reasons I chose this is because it is compatible with water cooling system. Next, I'll be using the motherboard from Asus ROG Strix. For this, I'll be using the AMD's Ryzen CPU 3950X. This is a 16-core 32-thread processor. The installation is pretty straightforward. All you have to do is to remove the pin right here and align the CPU pins directly into the holes and just wiggle it a bit so that you know it's fit in there, and then just put the pin back in. Next, I'll be installing the SSD. The SSD, I'll be using the FireCuda SSD M.2 NVMe. Make sure that you gently install this because it is quite delicate, and also make sure that you do not remove that small sticker on the top. These are the standoff screws in order to keep the SSD in place, and you will find this in the motherboard box.
This is the slot where I install the SSD, so you can install it on either one of the two slots, so I went for the one in between, so it's all up to you. Next we'll move on to installing the RAM sticks, and these are the slots on the motherboard. Here I'll be using the G-Skill Ryzen Z RGB 16GB RAM, so that's a total of 64GB RAM. And that, in my opinion, is more than enough for a gaming PC. Make sure you press the RAM sticks all the way in so that you hear that click. These are the screws that you need to install when you're fixing the motherboard into the chassis. Next, I'll be using the Corsair's QL140 RGB fan. I only bought one fan because that's the only one that's going to show out. There are two more slots for a 140mm fan, but that's going to be on the inside, so I did not buy another RGB fan. Be Quiet chassis already has two 140mm fans installed, so I'll be using those two on the front of the inside. And keep in mind that the black plate is the back side of the fan, so that should face outwards. Next, I'll be using the Seagate HDD Fire Cooler Gaming. The PSU I'll be using for this build is the Game Max RGB power supply unit, and this is 850 watts. Now there are so many cables that comes with the PSU, you really don't need to install all of them. You only have one HDD, so you're going to use fewer cables. Now before installing the PSU into the chassis, I would recommend you first plug the cables into the PSU first. Since there's only one CPU, so we only need one CPU cable and two PCIe cables for the graphic card. And these are the extension cables that I purchased. These are from Asia Horse, that's purple in color. Keep in mind that these are just the extension cables that go from the cables of the PSU into the motherboard. Now there are two cables that connects to the HDD, one that goes from the PSU and another that goes into the motherboard. And it's very important that you connect the reset cable, the power cable in the right slot, otherwise it could damage your motherboard. It was quite confusing for me at first to connect the reset and power cable and the other cables. If you're not sure how to install the cables, you have the motherboard manual. It's all in there, so it's easy for you to understand how and where the cablings go. Do not blindly connect the cables. Make sure you read the manual. And I would suggest you give the connections like the HD audio, USB and the power and reset cables before you fix the water cooling kit, so that you find it more convenient afterwards. Next, I'll be using Thermaltake's HARDTUBE liquid cooling kit. There were only 6 fittings and 2 90-degree fittings that came with the kit, so I got 2 additional fittings to suit my purpose. So I suggest you get some more to be on the safe side. Make sure you install the fans in such a way that the cables go behind. A small mistake that I made was, after screwing the fans in, I noticed that the cables were facing front. That's not what I want. The cables need to be facing backside. So make sure you know the orientation of the fans before you screw them in. Next, I'll be installing the CPU water block. also removed the back plate that was already installed on the motherboard and fixed the new back plate that is provided in the hard tube liquid cooling kit. Make sure you put just enough thermal paste and you gently put them on. Do not put a lot of it. One thing to note if you're building a water-cooled system is that you need to make sure that every component is of the same metal. Since my GPU is copper, you need to make sure that the CPU water block, the GPU, everything is copper. Do not mix the metals. That can actually damage your system. The cable that you see that's coming out of the CPU water block is the one that gives the RGB to the water block. So for now, just push it outside the back panel of the chassis so that later on you're ready to plug it in with the Thermaltake RGB fans. Now I'll be moving on to the powerhouse GeForce RTX 2080 Ti Hydro Copper. This is a water-cooled RTX graphic card. Once again, the installation of this GPU is extremely easy. I have installed this GPU in the vertical position so that the front side faces outwards, which is something that I prefer. So this is the Asia Horse PCIe extension cable. This is the PCIe cable you would use if you want to place the GPU in the vertical position. Once again, make sure you hear the click once you press the cable into the GPU and into the motherboard. And the rule of thumb is to connect the PCIe cable from the GPU to the primary slot on the motherboard. That would be the first one that is closest to the CPU. So this is how it's going to look like once it's installed. Make sure you don't bend them too much because it can be a bit delicate. Now when it comes to bending, I would recommend that you make a sketch of how you want the tubings to be. I had two options, one that looks like this and the second sketch was something that looks like this. The reason I did not go for the second sketch is because it did not have a neat look, which I did not find that much appealing. So I went with the first option. So a sketch would be really helpful. Now let's get into the best part, shall we? Now the heat gun actually tends to move when it's on, so make sure you place something in between, like how I'm doing it here, so that it doesn't move around. Now you don't have to buy a heat gun just meant for staying there permanently, but you can always improvise. Now I will not get into too much detail on how to do tube bending in this video. Perhaps I will make another video on tube bending. Once that's done, make sure you fit the tubes into it properly and tightly. Make sure there is no gaps in that. Make sure you know that there's not going to be any leakage. Well, now since we have everything set and all the components installed, let's get to the wiring or slash cabling. So what you can see here is that I would like to tell you how the cablings go where and how. So the cable that comes from the Corsair RGB fan, this cable is connected to the PCB board which powers the fan, and the RGB is connected to the Corsair's RGB hub, and that is given to the SATA power, which is also having another input that is connected to the Commander Node Pro that is inside. This goes to the PSU on the SATA, and so that's how this RGB is connected. And the cable over here, this is the cable for the LED strips, so that is also going to the LED input on the Commander Node Pro. The three Thermaltake fans which you can see right here is connected to each other by a cable to power up the RGB, and the CPU water block is also connected to the cables which is connected to each other. So that is what provides the Aura Sync RGB. And once these are all interconnected with each other, that is given onto the motherboard where the addressable RGB header is. The SATA cable that you see here is connected to this, which goes to the PSU. There is also another Molex input where I can connect the DDC pump onto that. Basically, I'm trying to reduce the number of cables by connecting more than one component. Now when it comes to the PCB board, as you can see, these two are the two Be Quiet fans on the front, and this is the cable that powers the Thermaltake fans, and this cable is the one that powers the PCB board, which is actually connected via SATA. The cable over here, which is going to the PSU, and the cable over here is the PWM input, which is connected to the motherboard's CPU fan header. And last but not the least, this is the cable I've given to connect to the RGB GPU, so that what's provides the lighting for the GPU. You can use the zip ties or anything that those cable ties in order to arrange the cables. Since this will be covered with the back panel, so you can cover it up and make it look less messier. Now you might ask, wow, this guy has a terrible cabling management. But if I'm closing the back panel, it is absolutely clean. All I needed was to make sure the cables did not pop out, and the back panel was fixed. Also take a look from a different angle if the cables are showing outside. So here, since this shroud covers the bottom part of the chassis, I actually didn't really arrange the cables, but most of the cabling is down underneath over here. Now this, ladies and gentlemen, is the moment of truth. So let's see if there's going to be any leakage. Just to be on the safe side, place some tissues right between the fittings. Make sure the liquid doesn't fall into the PSU. Now that it's all set up, I'm going to power it on. I powered it off because there was no enough liquid, so make sure you fill the reservoir to the top. And also make sure to keep your other hand on the power supply in case there is a leakage. It is quite normal to see bubbles forming at first, but let that slide slowly. So even though you notice bubbles, it is absolutely fine. That will go away slowly. So do not be afraid about that. So once the reservoir is completely filled with the liquid, let it run for some time until the bubbles slowly fade away. And you will eventually find a clean flow of the liquid without bubbles. Now that it's almost done, we have everything set up. This is the most favorite part of my build.
And finally, this is my most favorite part. It is an orgasm.
Thanks for watching, guys. If you like this video, like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more content, and give a thumbs up if you like this video.